Does more power equal more fun or more flips? Maybe both. Hello everyone and welcome! I've got a couple of custom-built 1/25th scale C3 Corvettes on the bench today. This yellow race car is a 1968 model year sourced from an AMT plastic model kit. While this is an older kit design, and it definitely wasn't the best fitting or most accurate representation of a 68 Corvette, it was still a fun project with a good looking result in the end. This 1975 Greenwood Sebring GT was created by SLA 3D printing the body instead of using a model kit as a donor. While of course there are a few extra steps involved in the process of creating a 3D printed body, in the end the car came out looking pretty good, despite a few minor imperfections here and there as a result of the 3D printing process. The staggered wheels, wide body kit, and black paint job really look cool on this car. Obviously both very fun projects, and it's nice to be able to showcase some of the pros and cons of both 3D printed bodies and those found in plastic model kits. Underneath though, each one of these cars uses an identical FP UC1 chassis. This is a very simple and adjustable design, both available as a physical kit on our website and for download and 3D printing on our Patreon. I've showcased the build process in detail for both of these cars in some prior videos here on the channel. Links to everything mentioned will of course be below in the description. Despite the brutally simple design of this chassis, it doesn't at all detract from the enjoyment of driving these cars, even if there isn't a ton of room for a track. The rear axles on both of these cars receive power from identical 4,000 RPM N20 motor and gear assemblies, and I use a 2S LiPo to power each of them. I recently bought a number of 3S compatible ESCs for use on a semi-truck build, and with these motors rated up to 12 volts, I thought why not experiment with changing out the ESC on one of these Corvettes and seeing what difference more power makes. 3S LiPo batteries obviously have a higher voltage output than a 2S, which will increase the speed of the motor. In this particular case though, I will be sacrificing a bit of runtime with these similarly sized batteries that I have here. A few things to watch out for though is that on 3S, the motor gets a lot hotter than it does on 2S, which I could see being an issue on some highly detailed models where the heat could make certain plastic parts deform. Also, if the motor is really buried in the car, such as being placed inside a piece made to look like an engine, that would probably not help with keeping the motor cool. Also, of course, make sure that the ESC you're using is compatible with a 3S LiPo. Both the ESC and battery I'm using here are pretty compact and fit well into this smaller scale Corvette. Without a doubt, there's a lot more power. Of course, these tiny N20 motors are never going to set the floor on fire, but for their size, they can get this car moving pretty quick, especially on 3S. Looking back as I'm making this video, I guess it wasn't the most authentic to be putting the 3S in the mid-70s Malaise era C3 versus the late 60s race car version, but we're just having fun. On this smooth vinyl surface where the car has less traction, there was a mix of understeer and oversteer in certain situations, which made the car very hard to control, but still pretty fun. On the foam mats where the car has a lot more traction, it was somewhat easier to control. As you can probably imagine, this chassis doesn't exactly have the highest degree of precision, being an easy to 3D print design more suited to the DIY RC model builder than something that's going to run down brushless Mini Zs. That said though, the relative non-uniformity of the foam tiles frequently setting the car off course, and my general lack of driving skills certainly doesn't help. Did I break the side mirrors off on several occasions? Sure, but after some time I was starting to get the hang of it. I couldn't use full throttle here as the car would get going too fast for this tiny track, and I was pretty much guaranteed to crash. Now unlike the 3S Corvette, with this yellow one, I can give it full throttle in certain sections around the track. In fact, I can actually make it around most of the track with a pretty generous amount of throttle as long as a bump doesn't send it sideways in one of the turns. Eventually my driving skills did start to warm up and it was time to get scientific. I was curious to see what kind of difference in lap times I could have in the 3S Corvette versus the 2S. There's an app called Lap Tracks that, among other things, allows you to use motion detection to keep track of your laps. It's got quite a few features and I might make a standalone video on it someday, but I've been using this app for quite a while and I like it a lot. Cruising around with one of these cars is cool, but when you actually have the ability to do some time trials and keep track of your lap times, averages, and see how well your driving improves over the course of multiple sessions, it makes driving a lot more fun. To start, I did several 10-lap time trials with the yellow Corvette before stepping up to the 3S one. On 2S, I was able to pretty easily average about a 5.4 second lap time. I knew on 3S it would be faster, but at first it was a lot harder to control, but eventually I got it dialed in. I really wanted to break 5 seconds, preferably before braking the car, and I was certainly able to do so, with a 4.5 second lap being my fastest of the night. There's no shortage of high-speed brushless RC vehicles out there, even in smaller scales like this. But I think it's worth pointing out that these cars can be built for well under $100, especially if you 3D print all of the chassis parts yourself. When you top them with a nice 3D printed body, or one sourced from a plastic model kit, they have a great scale look, with enough performance to make them a lot of fun to drive, and you don't need much room to build a track. In my opinion, a nice performance to looks to cost ratio. But hey, whatever you're driving, the hobby is all about testing, tinkering, and having fun. Again, I'll have some links below in the description if you're interested in doing a similar build to what I have here, as well as the build videos for each one of these Corvettes. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.